All right, everybody, welcome to the Service MVP podcast. My name is Joe Crisara, America's service coach, and I'm here with one of my very best friends, Chloe Davis from Express Services in Nampa, Idaho. Chloe, say hi to our people here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Well, you know what? There's very few people that when you first meet them, you feel like it's like you stepped into a pair of old shoes, or you feel like you wore a perfectly fitting sweater or something where it just feels very comfortable. And Chloe definitely has done that. When I work with Express Services, I had the red carpet welcome mat rolled out for Uncle Joe, and she's created a few terms called the Uncle Joe spike and things like that. So she's got
Yep.
got a bunch of her own little things there. But Chloe's going to do a thing today called just 3 tips to effective service business leadership. Chloe, why don't we start by just telling people how you got to the point where you emerged as one of the main leaders there at the Express Service Company in Nampa, Idaho?
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey in terms of my father starting the business in 2006. And it came to the point where I was in between going to college and figuring out the direction I wanted to go. And I was given the opportunity to work for the business in doing data entry and quote unquote marketing.
Hmm.
I just mainly posted memes. And as I, and as I started going to school and taking my business classes at Boise State, I started realizing that business was something that was second nature and something that I just fell in love with. And so I really started applying a lot that I learned from my college experience to the business. But it really came around when we went to Pantheon in 2019 and we discovered that we weren't the biggest fish in the sea.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we
And the
set out.
and the sea's pretty big too, isn't it? By the way,
Oh
it's a pretty
yeah.
big sea.
Oh yeah. And so it was one of those exciting things where we didn't know how to get there, but we knew that there was a destination. And I just remember seeing a business on stage and they said that they were $10 million. And we were like, that's triple, quadruple our size. Like, that's crazy. How do you get there? And for me, I am naturally highly theoretical. So I love learning. That's one of the base things that motivates me is just learning. And we ended up going visiting other shops, and it was just so natural for me to learn other businesses' ways and start doing them in our business. And it got to the point where we just kept doing this. We kept learning, from you, your processes. We kept learning from other processes as well too. And we just kept implementing and implementing. And there was a very high level of mutual respect between my dad and I, and it just got to the point where one day he looked at me and he goes, you've ran really hard. You've helped implement a lot of things in this business. Do you want to be, the CEO of the company? And I had to take a step back and say, of course, this is something that I would absolutely love to do, but what do those shoes look like and how can I fill them best to be me? So I read a lot of books. Readers are leaders.
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
And that's when I really started pushing the company forward, being the CEO of the company. I still have a lot of backing and a lot of respect from my parents. They still help me out, but also the leadership team. And that was something that has been really fun and exciting is to watch their growth, not only my growth as a leader, but also their growth too. So just a lot
Well,
of learning.
that's really great. Well, I do notice that. I said one couple things I want to make sure I do make some special mentions, honorable mentions here, because and I did promise Ben, who is your father,
Hmm.
Ben Davis, that I would get him on the podcast too. I think he was a little bit hey, maybe someday I'll get on there. Out there. I'm like, yeah, right. You're right. You'll get. Don't worry, we're going to get you there, Ben. But truthfully, Ben and Jennifer Davis are two of the
Hmm.
finest people. I think you'll agree with me too, right, Chloe? That they're two of the finest people that anybody could ever hope to meet, and
Yeah.
all heart in so many ways, and so giving. And Ben and the team, the Express team, and you, Chloe. really embody the thing I've always said about contractors, that they would give their last dime to make sure that their employees were
Oh, yeah.
educated and got what they need to perform their job right. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. One of our base core values is to protect people, and it's all about being kind and encouraging and building each other up. And that's one of the fundamental core values that my dad has. And
Yeah,
so it's
I
really
think that's
good to
true,
see it.
and they
Yeah.
live it out too. I mean, seriously,
Mm-hmm.
when even though even when they deliver bad news, sometimes they definitely know how to do that in a kind and caring way. You always leave a meeting with the Davis family, feeling cared for, respected, and supported for sure. Well, if you don't mind, Chloe, I mean, although we can have this, we could have a bouquet of roses given to each other for could probably do that for a couple hours. There's so many great things we could say about each other, but let's talk about these tips. I know becoming a leader, and Ben has, I do recall him investing both the time and the energy and money to get you leadership lessons and some training on leadership and things like that as
Mm-hmm.
well too. Why don't we go ahead and just have you, from your point of view, as somebody who's recently been elevated to one of the highest positions in the company, just give us 3 tips that you can say were instrumental in your journey to becoming a leader. And listen, I know it's not, it's always a work in progress. No, we're never, even me, I never look at
Mm-hmm.
myself like I'm finished. Like I've got a lot to learn, and I'm willing to. So I'm going to take some notes right now and get my trusty pen right here. So I'm going to get this and take some notes and see what I can learn from you right now. So give us the first tip, if you can, for effective leadership in a service contracting business. What do you think?
Well, for me, number one, the definition of leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it.
Mm,
So it's not about forcing people to do things. It's about getting a team to be able to accomplish a goal because they want to accomplish it. You
mm,
always have to answer the what's in it for me. Why should they care about this goal? Not just because they get to keep their job, but why? So you have to be able to set up some clear expectations. And with these clear expectations, you have to be able to show them how it's going to impact them professionally and personally. So with clear expectations, that was a huge road bump that our team experienced, and I loved watching it. It was
mm,
big growing pains. With clear expectations, that's just setting up a KPI, a key fundamental, a performance indicator, and where you want them to be and when you want them to get there by. So you
mhm,
can't just say, oh, I want your average ticket to go from $300 to $500. You have to set an actual deadline and a date in order for them to be able to do that with that clear
mhm.
expectation, and be willing to help them. I think that was one of my favorite things was watching our team members actually ask for help instead of us feel like we're dragging them along.
One thing I noticed when I was up there and working with you guys a couple times now is that there'll be a lot of good ideas I put on the board, and everybody like, "Oh, that's a good one, Uncle Joe," and that's like it sounds good. And then we'd have a meeting about it, and then we had a guy, Ben specifically, who was very great at creating scrutiny of the idea and saying, "Okay, it sounds like a great idea," and he was like, when we were doing it, he was on board. Then all of a sudden, he had this moment. He always had this moment at the end of every time we had an idea. He said, "All right, well, what's the actionable item? What are we doing about this then?
Hmm.
Because otherwise, it's not going. Nothing happens." And so, so it wasn't just that. It's like in a way they say leaders are kind of like the ultimate salespeople, getting people to do what you want them to do, but make them want to do it. Just like
Hmm.
when you sell a customer, you can't have the customer forced to buy something. How important is it that you have a guy like Ben, a partner like him, to create that scrutiny to make sure that it becomes actionable? Tell me about, because you mentioned the deadline part of it. That kind of inspired me to think about him
Hmm.
when you said that to me. Was that
So
wrong to say that? What do you think?
uh, that is a huge thing that needs to be embedded into the culture, not just from one person driving it. And Ben had always and still does a really good job pushing the team to be able to clarify those kind of things. But it gets to a certain point in time where that natural instinct has to be taught down the leadership ladder. Because if it is just the one person pushing it and pushing it, it's great, but it only goes so far. So that was something that I've been really focusing on throughout the past 2 years, pushing that type of natural instincts down into the team. A big thing I've had to learn is common sense isn't the same for everybody. So something I feel is quote unquote common sense
Hmm.
isn't common sense for one of my other leaders, but they have huge strengths and have other things that are common sense that aren't to me. So there's these key fundamental things like setting up clear expectations that I've had to constantly morph into an actual behavior that they do automatically and on their own. And so Ben was, like I said, was just a really good fundamental piece to that foundation. And then we've learned to push that down to the rest of the team. It's
Yeah,
it's
I,
hard.
yeah, I think it brings up a really good point about sometimes you need a little bit of a distance. Like sometimes when he was like letting you kind of lead the thing, and then he took a little step back and said, "Yeah, okay, I'm seeing the whole picture now, not just the idea we have, but how we're going to make this actionable." And so, number one, I would say inspiring people to make your idea their idea, so they're on
Hmm.
board. Number two, you already gave me number two. You didn't warn me you're going to give me that,
Yeah.
which is KPIs and a
Hmm.
vision. And a deadline, like we just
Hmm.
talked about, the accountability of a deadline there. Man, we have so many lessons. I mean, I don't know why we only have three, but that's just what I try to figure out. But anyway, what else you got? Can you move on to another one? I mean, they're all kind of blending together actually. But go ahead and tell me another one if you got something else in the hopper.
I do with leadership, it's don't make it personal. I think that was a huge thing where we can make the policy or procedure the bad guy. And it just makes leadership so much more um, actionable for the management team members when we're able to really refer a policy or procedure and not make it personal anymore and say, hey, we're here to work together. Here's the expectation. Here's the policy or procedure, like the Uncle Joe process for doing a standard service call. Here is this process written down. Here's what you're doing. Let's work together to get there. Far too many times as our leadership team was developing, did we make it too personal? And that's when a team member feels attacked. They put their
Mm,
guards up immediately and then they start justifying their actions. But if you have some guidelines written down and you say, no, here's the process. We're both agreeing on this. Here's where you're at. Let's work together and just pick one thing to work on. So, like I'm saying, don't make it personal. And the easiest way to do that is by having something written down, either a policy or procedure or an operational manual that you're referring together and you are working together to accomplish
yeah.
that goal.
Well, it's like interesting because you say don't make it personal. Yet, I can't think of any family other than the Davis family that does make it more personal because it's not the policy isn't personal,
Right.
but your motivation and your care for everybody is very personal. The way Ben and you and
Hmm.
Jennifer talk to people, it's that's why you're so endeared by the contracting community, I believe, is because you do have a sense of care. And so how do you separate that? You got the policy, which is,
Hmm.
okay, this is a business policy. It's just business on this hand. But on the other
Yeah.
hand, you got to make sure you got the motivation. Tell me a little bit about that too.
I put so much passion, and so does my dad and my mother, with creating a career path. Our motto, and I'm implementing this from somebody, I've heard this before,
Hmm.
is if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And
Mm,
we put so much care and love and time and effort into making a career path that is there for the person to grab. There's qualifications checklist, there is clear standards, training. There's just so much that that person can grab that if they want it, if they want to one day become a service field supervisor or even a service manager in our company, it is there. So the personal touch, the care, the love, and the passion that we have for every single person is motivating them to go through their career path with an express plumbing, heating, and air. Everything from an apprentice to a junior tech to a senior tech and then to a field supervisor. So, yes, we don't make it personal in terms of what they're doing wrong. We make it personal in terms of what they're doing right. Here's
there
your
you go.
career path. You do it, and you're perfectly laid out. And so we celebrate a huge thing that I've had to learn is catch people doing it right. Don't try to always seek out catching them doing something wrong. And what I mean by that is if you see somebody doing something wrong, correct it. Just do a verbal. And then the instant that they do it right, reward them. Give them a high five, motivate them, give them a pat on the back. Catch them doing that right more often. I would
Hmm.
rather motivate my team a positive way than a negative way. Because if you're like, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, it just it demotivates. Then how can I do anything? If I can't even do this right, how can I do something else right? And so
Would you say
that's where that passion comes from.
would you say that these concepts, they're although we're talking as if you're running the whole business, but it could be these are all true concepts on a service call, a sales call, you parenting your children or your family. Do you live these truths, which are self-evident in all parts of your life, Chloe? How's that work out there?
Whenever a company has core values, the thing I love about them is that they make your own personal core values so much more easier to define. Because, like, things like, demonstrate integrity, we can all pretty much agree that that's a pretty easy thing to do. And so
It should
it's,
be. It should be.
yeah, right. It's one of those things as a CEO of a company and as a daughter of somebody who founded the company, you have to believe in these core values. And in order to believe in them, you have to act on them. And so, yes, it's something that these are things that are so easy for me to make decisions on because they are at the base of who I am. And I tell every single one of my team members, I don't care if this is your first day or you've been with the company since we started day one. If you make a decision based off of one of our core values, I'm going to stand behind you 110% because it's the exact same decision I would have made.
Mm,
And those are things that
that's
I really live by.
I love that. I love that. Well, I do want to give you a chance for one more thing. This is I'm not sure if we did the third one or not, but what the heck? I think it's all really good information. But nonetheless, I do want to I want to tee this one up for you because when I
Mhm.
was up there last time, you all of a sudden you gave a spiel about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and it really hit me hard. I don't know if you know that or not, but if you'll go look at it, I made a TikTok and noted I tagged you in the TikTok as a day. Hey girl, this is you here.
Mhm.
But it was it really it hit me hard, and it's like, yeah, this is what the heart of motivation. Could you expand on that just for some of the listeners so they can get a little bit of little taste of what you mentioned to me that day?
Yeah. And so one of the key things with building a company and getting people to do things that you want them to do because it's what they want to do is depending on the motivational factor. There's two ways you can motivate somebody, whether that's intrinsically or extrinsically. Intrinsic motivation is a really natural thing and it's something that you can build off of. Extrinsic motivation, it's very short-lived. And extrinsic motivation is for a very short burst, giving somebody an additional $100 for doing this one action. Only one
Hmm.
time, it's not even consistent. And so
Hmm.
extrinsic motivation, it does work for a very short amount of time, but their reason for doing something is because of outside factors. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with why they want to do it personally. Intrinsic motivation is about them wanting to do something because it's just inside of them. They have something inside themselves pushing them forward. And with intrinsic motivation, you can first find something that does motivate that person personally. So money might motivate somebody different than somebody else, but with intrinsic motivation, it's really about being able to have somebody that just naturally wants to push themselves forward. But a key to that, and something I found out recently, is make it their idea. And the way to
Hmm.
make it their idea is asking questions. Don't tell them. It's asking questions. So, what do you think about this, KP?
Oh,
Oh,
you're okay now. We
hello. I
lost your
don't know
sound.
what happened there.
We lost your
Hello.
sound for a second. You're good now. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. And so it's all about making it their idea and asking open-ended questions and guiding them down because then you're going to find what intrinsically motivates them and help them keep pushing themselves forward instead of you constantly dragging. If you feel like you're constantly dragging somebody to water, they're not going to drink the water all the time. But if you
Hmm.
are walking behind them and they're leading you to the water, then that's how you know that they're intrinsically motivated. And there'll be times where you just feel like um, some people do need a deposit in their piggy bank.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
need emotion, they need love and care. And so if you know somebody's going off 90% of the time, it's because they haven't felt love recently. So I
Hmm.
really do encourage our team members to make a deposit in a piggy bank, is what we call it, to help with that emotion.
It is it's an interesting way of kind of coming toward the end of our interview here, Chloe, which is mentioning that word love. I could tell you one
Yes.
thing. Ben Davis has never held back when he loves you. He literally, I don't think I've ever heard any client say, "Hey man, I love you," and I'm I'm like, it just I just got a chill in my spine now when I said it because he has never held back in his feelings when he does love somebody, and it is a certain there's different forms of love, obviously, but his love for other people is so evident, and obviously it's filtered down into you, Chloe, and you're definitely a great representative for the family and for the company and for all of Idaho. I might say that as well. And
Thank you.
and definitely I want to say thank you, and I love you. I love your family as well too. To make sure you guys all understand that as well. Okay.
Well, I love you too, Uncle Joe.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, everybody. If you ever want if you ever want to talk to Chloe, she's an open person, and just don't flood them too much. They had a thing where they were on the Service Titan video thing, and they got flooded with calls. Like, all right, turn that video off. But I won't do that because I don't think my podcast has got that same capability as Service Titan has. But Chloe, thanks a lot for being on the podcast here today, and thanks for your amazing example of what great leadership is about. And I know that we're always working on it, and definitely I can't think of anybody I would rather work with than you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chloe.